Hey everyone, it is Dani and welcome to this update video. I hope that you guys are doing really great this morning. And so I'll be taking you guys through what is currently happening across the North Atlantic. Of course, we have that rainfall activity still taking place across the Caribbean, so it's been persistent. And then I'm going to be taking you guys through other conditions such as that Saharan dust and even the sea surface temperatures for the Western Atlantic. Y también incluiré una breve actualización en español. And so before I go into details, please do subscribe if you haven't yet done so and tap the notification bell so that you never miss an important update. Okay, so as we take a look at this infrared satellite imagery here, we can tell that there is quite a bit of activity across some areas. As I said earlier, we still have that activity across sections of the Caribbean. We see that the intertropical convergence zone is pretty much active, seeing a bit more convective activity over in the Eastern Pacific. And of course, we've got a few tropical waves out there making their way toward the west. And so let's zoom into some areas here, starting with northeastern South America. And we can see that we've got some clusters of convective activity here and there. We've got some activity moving over Guyana. And by the way, the axis of one of those tropical waves is extended into Guyana. So not seeing where too much is in association with that wave. But we got some clusters of convective activity just to the north of Suriname and French Guiana. Going to the vicinity of Trinidad and northeastern Venezuela, we also see some activity there. The ABC Islands looking pretty dry. And as a matter of fact, we have that Saharan dust moving in that's going to be helping to enhance that dryness within the area, and not only for the ABC Islands but for other areas as well. So let's look at the general Caribbean region now, and here we can see that we still have that activity, of course, seeing some of those areas of deeper convection across some sections of the Bahamas, going into eastern Cuba, Little Cayman and Cayman Brac, and even just in the vicinity of Jamaica. So the western side of Jamaica is likely going to be impacted by a new blob of deep convection developing, where we have lots of showers and thunderstorms taking place. Look into other areas now: Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, the Lesser Antilles, inclusive of Barbados, of course. Things are pretty dry. We have that little cluster of some showers and thunderstorms moving in, and those other cloud clusters coming from the tropical Atlantic, and that those might bring along with them maybe an isolated shower or so, but that is pretty much the most expected in the Eastern Caribbean as we head throughout today. Going to the west, where we have Central America, of course, we have some activity over there as well, not so dry compared to the east, but nonetheless, some areas are still in the clear when in terms of that rainfall activity. So now let's go ahead and move on to this Saharan air layer map. So of course, this is the Saharan dust that travels all the way from the Sahara Desert in Africa. It's carried westward, of course, by those trade winds. And we are in June, and it's no surprise that it's here, because this is really peak time for us to start having these plumes or these masses of Saharan dust making their way through. But what they help to do as well is to suppress activity, especially out in the tropical Atlantic. We don't typically look for development coming from the tropical Atlantic in the month of June, but of course, not to say that it is impossible, because once we have this break in all this massive dry air and conditions are conducive enough, we can even have some of those waves making their way close to the Caribbean and start developing. But of course, majority of that activity is expected heading to the peak of the season as we head to later in the year. But we have that massive Saharan dust that has entered the Caribbean, affecting most of the eastern islands. Of course, we have parts of Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, the Lesser Antilles, and of course the ABC Islands. So you might notice that it is pretty hazy and dry, and whereas the sky is usually blue and beautiful, it seems to have a sort of hue to it. It looks cloudy, but there are no clouds there. So that is what the Saharan dust does. And it also has some health concerns in terms of allergic reactions, of course, and skin irritation, especially when it is in a large quantity. So please be aware of that, guys. Entonces, para Puerto Rico, la República Dominicana y otras partes del noreste del Caribe, ha sido bastante seco y cálido con este extenso periodo sin mucha lluvia en el área. Desafortunadamente, este tipo de clima persistirá junto con la masa de polvo. Trata de mantenerse lo más fresco posible, ya que estas condiciones siguen siendo frecuentes. Okay, and so now, as I said, we're going to be taking a look at the rainfall maps, and then we're going to be looking at the sea surface temperatures. So we're looking at the GFS first, and this is what is expected as we progress through today. Of course, as we head up on this scale in terms of the different colors, more rainfall is expected, and those values you see are in inches. And so we can see here that across the Caribbean, majority of that rainfall is expected to take place in the vicinity of going to parts of central Cuba. I'll take a look at that. Lots of rainfall expected in the island, and so that can result in lots of those mudslides, as well as a lot of that inundation in terms of the flooding. And you also see some parts of the Bahamas expected to receive some substantial rainfall heading through today. Going to Jamaica, not as much rainfall activity expected, but again, of course, we have that new area of deep convection that is spilling over into the western parishes. So heading through today, there can be some of these pop-ups of lots of these showers and thunderstorms at times, but overall for the island, we should be seeing some improved weather compared to the previous couple of days. But of course, this overall activity in the northern Caribbean is likely going to be persistent up until near the end of tomorrow. So looking to other areas now, such as parts of Central America and northern South America, and even in the vicinity of Trinidad, we can see that some substantial rainfall is expected. Going on to Euro, the Euro is not showing as much rainfall in parts of Cuba compared to GFS, but definitely showing that there will be a lot in the vicinity of the Bahamas. So really just the Bahamas, the Cayman Islands, Cuba, and possibly for some sections of Jamaica. But of course, heading to Central and South America, we have the model in agreement with GFS in terms of the rainfall activity across that area. Of course, as I said earlier, things are going to be a bit drier in the east and very dry for some areas, but we have those little cloud clusters coming from the tropical Atlantic that might induce some brief isolated showers across some areas. So that is what is expected in terms of the rainfall. And now the sea surface temperature map. So sea surface temperatures for the North Atlantic is above normal for this time of year, and it will continue to get warm as we progress through the hurricane season. And of course, we look for peak activity going to the month of September and even before that. And this is a key ingredient in terms of tropical cyclone development. So these ocean temperatures will just continue to warm as we head throughout the season and eventually support the development of these systems here. But the key thing to note is that things are warmer than normal, and that is why even with the previous predictions for the hurricane season, it's so complex to forecast, because there are these contrasting conditions that would either support or hinder development of our storms. But of course, guys, I'm going to be keeping you updated as time goes by in terms of anything, and in terms of that system GFS was showing, the model is still showing it, and only time will tell what's going to eventually happen. And it's not impossible, let me reiterate that, it is not impossible for us to see development within the area, because it is even pretty active right now, and development will all be dependent on on how conducive conditions are. And so guys, that is pretty much it for this update video, and I hope that you found it to be quite informative. But if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments, and you can also share your thoughts there. And of course, remember to always be weatherwise.